On the roast, Dolce Gabbana are sentenced for tax evasion and Channel 9 is accused of influencing Cricket Australia. But first, it's been just 6 months since the Sandy Hook school shooting claimed the lives of 20 children and 6 adults. But already there have been an additional 5,201 gun deaths in America, which is why on Tuesday the White House released its School Massacre Survival Guides, along with 2 others.
And a guide for developing high-quality emergency operation plans for institutions of higher learning, and a guide for developing high-quality emergency operation plans for houses of worship.
Now, obviously, gun control is a highly contentious topic in the United States, and as these guides explained...
Understandably, this is a sensitive topic. There is no single answer for what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there is. Something I learned back in high school where I wasn't being shot at is that it's almost scientifically impossible to shoot someone without a gun. But look, when it comes to trying to curb gun crime, the fact that the US government is doing something is better than doing nothing. It's just 3 booklets are a lot closer to nothing than something. Still, if tighter gun legislation isn't where they're headed, at least these guides do have some reassuring language.
Noise from alarms, gunfire, explosions, and people shouting and screaming should be expected.
So when all of this is going on, you just carefully pick up the booklet, turn to the relevant chapter, and then hold it in front of your chest and hope it stops the bullets. Because booklets stop bullets, right? Well, if that doesn't work...
Students and staff should be trained to hide in locations where the walls might be thicker and have fewer windows.
Helpful information there, where the government is suggesting you get behind thicker walls to give yourself the best chance of surviving the armour-piercing bullets that are legally available throughout the United States. And while these booklets are aimed towards teachers and administrators and religious leaders, the information that guns kill you is a lesson for everyone. So maybe the answer lies in writing a few more books for younger children who are used to receiving moral messages in their stories from animals. For answers, let's cross now to Jazz Twemlow and his giant son.
Thanks, Tom. As a test, I tried getting little Dave here to read Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Operation Plans.
Boring.
Shh. But he wasn't interested, so that's why we're learning about American gun safety with my book, Grumpy Duck Has a Gun. Yeah, I know. Sometimes when a fluffy duck gets grumpy, he can waddle into a gun shop, easily purchase a semi-automatic weapon with limited background checks, and open fire on the public.
But why does Grumpy Duck have a gun, Dad?
To protect himself. Good night.
OK, well, that's all well and good for American kids, but what about Australian children?
Well, I've made an Australian version too, Tom. Wakey, 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 wakey. It's story time. It's time for Grumpy Duck Has a Nothing.
What?
Let's start. Grumpy Duck was in a whirl. He felt the other animals in the pond didn't understand him. And then if the man in the Australian school gets angry, don't worry, he almost certainly doesn't have a gun. And if you're in a cinema and you hear gunfire, don't worry, it's the people in the movie. It's incredibly unlikely that the actual people in the cinema have guns.
So why doesn't the duck in that one have a gun, Dad?
To protect everyone else.
But in the other story...
Shh. Sleepy time.
Geez, I tell you what, I'm glad Australia doesn't have guns. I've never been much of a reader. Anyway, to our next story, an Italian fashion designers Dolce Gabbana have been sentenced to almost 2 years in prison for tax evasion. Domenico Dolce and Stefano Gabbana, seen here acting as Victoria Beckham's least intimidating bodyguards, have also been ordered to pay a €500,000 fine, or one and a bit of these $400,000 Dolce & Gabbana sunglasses. And that's because they evaded more than €200 million in tax, which means they've been avoiding tax like supermodels avoid me. Food, sorry, I meant food. And the designers were accused of setting up a shell company in Luxembourg in 2004 and 2005 to avoid paying Italian taxes, which sounds pretty sneaky. So how were they caught?
They set up a Luxembourg company, Gardo, an acronym of the surnames of the 2 designers.
Which interestingly is how they also nailed Capone for tax evasion through his shell company. See, what Dolce & Gabbana needed was a company name that said, this has nothing to do with Dolce & Gabbana, something like Versace. But they didn't, and now prosecutor Laura Petio says she has rock-solid proof that the duo had committed sophisticated tax fraud. Sophisticated tax fraud, the kind of tax fraud that knows which fork to use. And in what must be a double blow for the duo, they can now expect people on the streets of Italy not only selling knockoffs of their products, but also knockoffs of their tax fraud.
Hey partner, you look like you want to avoid some tax. Oh yeah! I've got fraudulent receipts, I've got your offshore shell companies, or I've got a Gangnam Style bobblehead.
Was that Clark? Look, this sentence is obviously a huge blow for both the design duo and leather-faced women the world over. But it also reveals an all too common problem amongst the mega rich, facing punishment for not paying tax. There was Martha Stewart spending a year in jail, Wesley Snipes being locked up for 3 years, and now Dolce & Gabbana could spend nearly 2 years in the can. So what can fashionistas and the mega rich in general do to avoid punishment for tax evasion? Nick Richardson thinks he has the answer. Nick.
Tom, the reason these Mr. and Mrs. Moneybagses are trying to avoid paying tax is because when they do pay tax, they get so little recognition. Remember Paul Hogan?
Yeah, the wrestler with the big moustache.
No, he's the Australian guy who thinks prawns are called shrimp. And he was accused of tax evasion a few years ago, saying at the time, as a guy who brought millions into Australia, they should build a statue at the tax office to me and send me a Christmas card. And maybe he's right. Maybe if we appreciated the big taxpayers, they'd be more willing to give us the money they should have in the first place. For example, pay 10 million in tax this year and a freeway will be named after you. Pay over 50 million and we'll build a school in your honour and let you design the syllabus. All the exams are cupcakes at old Martha Stewart High. And for the fashion designers who are obsessed with printing their names on everything, why not give your government the $200 million you owe them and we'll rename the country after you for the whole month? Let's make Italy Dolce & Gabbana land.
On the one hand, that's pretty dumb. On the other hand, the uniforms would be pretty stylish.
Yeah, and since they have a brand to protect, Dolce & Gabbana would have to make sure that Dolce & Gabbana land would be a high-quality place to live. Not like you in your Lowe's land.
At Lowe'sland!
They're such an angry company. Finally tonight, to cricket news, and Managing Director of Channel 9, Jeffrey Brown, is in hot water after implying that his network would try to influence team selections and scheduling for the Australian cricket team. Brown, speaking especially about the questionable and completely annoying policy of resting star players every other game, said,
"We urge Cricket Australia to pick the best players every time, and from now on there will be a lot more discussions between Cricket Australia and the broadcaster about resting players."
Cricket Australia Chief Executive James Sutherland hit back though, saying team selections and scheduling are matters for Cricket Australia. But for Channel 9, who paid $450 million in a broadcast deal earlier this month, that makes cricket the only thing they show on their network that they don't have direct influence over. With every other television show the network has input in casting and scripting and direction and editorial. So why should sport be any different? Maybe Michael Clarke was out for a duck, but maybe it was just his evil twin. And with that in mind, we've managed to score a sneak peek of Channel 9's proposed changes to cricket. So here's a highlights reel from their pilot broadcast.
Welcome to Channel 9's coverage of the Ashes. Today's game at Underbelly Oval is sure to be a corker Clark.
Oh, you bet. Let's take a look at Australia's batting lineup. Now, the network's not keen on resting its star players, so although she's juggling mornings and Big Brother, Sonia Kruger will be opening the batting with David Warner.
Australian cricket has really never been the same since the War brothers retired. Fortunately, the network has fixed it, so batting at 4 and 5, we've got the Stefanovic brothers.
He's coming to bowl now. Oh, that's hit his pads! Oh, he could be out!
And umpire Joel Madden is hovering his hand above the out buzzer, but seems hesitant to actually make a decision, so he's gone to the home viewer. Oh, good thing he's got that white hat on to cover the haircut.
Oh, right. So if you think he's out, call 1-900-GETAWAY. Or if you think he's not out, call 1-900-THE MENTALIST. Remember, your decision will determine the outcome.
And while we're waiting for you to decide, let's talk memorabilia now. This could be your last chance to own one of our limited edition cricket bats, personally signed by Brendan Cowell, Lockie Hume, and the chick who plays Rhonda in those Amy ads.
Oh, one of those would look great in the pool room.
Yes, please. And that's 4! Laurie Oakes hasn't even bothered to run for it.
Okay, so it's just hit 2:30 to a block, which means it's time for the players to take a tea break and for our viewers at home to get set for Channel 9's hit reality TV show.
Tea break. Drama is brewing.
And let's just take a look at some of the upcoming matches in this test series. We'll be heading to Melbourne for A Tale of Two Countries.
Matthew Newton will be opening the batting there and should give the ball a good whack. Then it's on to Sydney for the Golden Duck, when the Australian cricket team will be up against Team Delta. Join us after the break.
I mean, it's no Cops LAC, that's for sure. Good night.